Good day. Even as the situation in the Middle East continues to deteriorate, the US administration has signaled where its true priorities lie, as confirmed by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken's travel itinerary over the course of the next week. He is currently on his way to Europe, where over a course of a week he will travel to Denmark, Iceland and Greenland, and will attend between May 19th and 20th the Arctic Council ministerial meeting, which is going to take place in the Icelandic capital Reykjavik. The person that he is really seeking to meet there over the course of that Arctic summit is none other than the hard man of international diplomacy, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. I should say that Russia has been steadily positioning itself over the last few years as the dominant Arctic power. It has built up a large nuclear-powered icebreaker fleet. It's deployed powerful armed forces, much with specialized Arctic equipment to the Arctic region. And of course, it is also busy developing the economic resources of the Arctic, the various oil and gas fields that lie there, the liquefied natural gas projects that the Russians also have ongoing there, the Northern Sea route, which I discussed in a recent video, which is now being made possible due to the melting of the Arctic ice, and of course the prospects of further mining for valuable minerals, which are also supposed or believed to exist there. There was a recent report, in fact, that the Russians found an enormous deposit of rare earths, possibly the biggest in the world, and they might also be in a position to find large deposits of lithium metals in this region. Russia, by the way, is due to assume the chairmanship of the Arctic Council at this meeting in Reykjavik. Last but not least, from a US point of view, is the Russian naval buildup, which is taking place in the Arctic. This is something that has not been talked about very much. Much of the focus in discussing naval buildups has been on the Pacific, where the Chinese are busy building up their surface fleet with their big aircraft carrier program, which is directly challenging the United States in the Pacific region, and which is threatening to put increasing pressure on the island of Taiwan, which has a government independent of that of the Chinese mainland, but which China says is an integral part of China, a view, incidentally, endorsed by most of the international community and by the vast majority of Chinese people, both in China itself and outside it. Anyway, the Russian naval buildup in the Arctic gets less attention because it is less visible, but it takes the form of undersea developments. The Russians have shown far less interest in aircraft carrier development. They only have one rather old carrier from the 1990s, the Kuznetsov, which is currently undergoing refurbishment, a much-needed refurbishment program, but which many people question its viability anyway. But their focus has been overwhelmingly on developing their nuclear-powered submarine force, which is now starting to emerge as a potentially powerful threat in the northern seas, around the Arctic and in the North Atlantic. In particular, the Russians by the end of this year are expected to have in service 3 extremely powerful and sophisticated Yasen-class cruise missile nuclear submarines, supposedly amongst the most effective and powerful submarines in the world. And they're also known to be working hard on developing the Poseidon nuclear-powered and nuclear-tipped submarine drone, which can apparently reach the coast of the United States with a very high-powered nuclear warhead, setting a tsunami there, and can be launched from Russia's own Arctic waters, since it is nuclear powered. That, by the way, is an enormously powerful potential weapon system, one which I intend at some point to devote an entire video to. But anyway, the Russians are a major Arctic power, and they're getting stronger in this region all the time in a way that the United States is struggling at the moment to match. But it is not, of course, the growth of Russian power in the Arctic that is the reason for Blinken's desire to meet with Lavrov in Reykjavik. Important, though, the growth of Russia's Arctic power no doubt is. The reason Blinken wants to meet with Lavrov is in order to get this summit meeting that the US is pressing for between President Biden and President Putin moving. The Russians, as I have said, are becoming increasingly concerned and cool about the idea. It was sprung on them in a telephone call by President Biden, which came out of the blue, in which President Biden called President Putin in the middle of the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, at a time when Russian military troops were deploying on Ukraine's eastern border in response to the Ukrainian deployments on the contact line, and over the course of which President Biden sought to persuade the Russians to de-escalate the crisis in Ukraine by drawing down their troops, something which the Russians have only done, apparently, to a certain degree. Anyway, over the course of that call, which, as I said, came unexpectedly, Biden made the unexpected suggestion to Putin of a summit meeting between himself and Putin to be held in some European capital over the next few weeks, with the purpose of achieving a predictable and stable relationship between Russia and the United States without a further de-escalation or without a further escalation and without a further spiraling down in the relationship between the two countries. And the purpose of this meeting and the reason why the US is taking these steps is in fact quite clear. Now, on the one hand, obviously, was all part of a desire to avoid a military confrontation in Ukraine, which would end in a war which Ukraine would lose and which might quite easily have resulted in Ukraine's destruction, as Sergei Lavrov said would happen in an interview he did with the Russian media in April. But also, there is a further deeper meaning and purpose to this, and it has been explained in an article which has appeared in the Japanese media outlet Nikkei Asia, and which is able to discuss these issues perhaps in a more straightforward way than is possible either in the United States itself or in the EU, in the European media at this time. And this is what Nikkei Asia says. The most important part of Blinken's trip will not be the Arctic Council discussion, but Blinken's bilateral meeting with Lavrov. The Biden administration is hoping that the Arctic and climate can be positive agenda items in the US-Russia relationship. By sustaining US-Russia relations in a managed space, the administration can keep all the focus on China in the Indo-Pacific. And that is based upon comments made to Nikkei Asia by Heather Conley, who is the Senior Vice President for Europe, Eurasia and the Arctic at the Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Studies. So ultimately, it's all about China. It's all about the fact that the United States now sees very belatedly that the true challenge to America's long-term power is China, and the need by the United States to transfer all its energies and focus to confronting China in the Indo-Pacific region rather than have to be distracted by facing off against Russia in Europe, in places like Ukraine. Now, that's all very good. As I said, it's very belated. Such steps, had they been taken 10 years ago, might have found a receptive audience in Moscow, but now they've been greeted in Russia with great skepticism and growing mistrust. And there are, of course, reasons for that mistrust. And one of these is that the Russians are finding that though the US is anxious to speak with them and is anxious to hold the summit meeting between Putin and Biden in June, they are finding it extremely difficult to agree to Russian ideas about an agenda. And none other than Sergei Lavrov himself has actually complained about this. He said that when it comes to strategic questions, this is arms control, the Russians are finding that the US is proving extremely resistant to broadening that agenda to cover all sorts of topics that are of mutual importance, or at least that the Russians see as mutual importance in terms of strategic weapons. They want to keep the agenda as narrow as possible. We don't quite know what that means, but anyway, the Russians are clearly unhappy about that. And now we've also had a further interview with another senior official. This is Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, who has said that while Moscow is always open to dialogue and believes that a summit meeting is crucial both politically and diplomatically, there is as of yet no clear agenda agreed between the US and Russia. The Russians are carefully examining US proposals, but it is clear that they are not satisfied with them. Moreover, it seems that Lavrov and Blinken, as well as this meeting in Reykjavik, or perhaps more correctly, in advance of this meeting in Reykjavik, have spoken on the phone. And this is presumably also in an effort to kickstart the discussions and to agree to some sort of an agenda. But the trouble is, once more, we're finding it difficult to get readouts of this call. Neither the State Department nor the Russian Foreign Ministry are producing or publishing such a readout. Now, that could be because they don't want to publicize the sensitive issues that are being discussed in order to not to alarm, perhaps, some of Washington's European allies. Or it could be, and perhaps more plausibly is, that these discussions have gone nowhere and are not resulting in anything. I am far from convinced that this summit meeting will happen, and I've heard well-connected Russians like Vladimir Kozin, who is an academic in Russia, but somebody who is well-informed about Russian thinking and who teaches at the Russian General Staff Academy, saying that they need a clear agenda before this summit can happen, and with the implication being that they're not getting it at the moment. None of this would surprise me. The US always finds it extremely difficult to give, and though the US has at times, in recent weeks, spoken about the need to make concessions to Russia, there was that extraordinary article by Anonymous, as he was called, in the Atlantic Council website, which spoke about the need for the United States to make concessions to Russia in order that it can free itself to focus on its confrontation with China in the Pacific region. when it actually comes down to deciding what these concessions are going to be, the United States finds that incredibly difficult. The US always faces this problem that it stakes out extreme positions and then finds it all but impossible to retreat from them, even as they become unsustainable. So that, for example, a straightforward commitment by the United States that there should be no admission of Ukraine to NATO is something that the United States seems incapable of agreeing to, even though, by the way, and for historical information, it has agreed to that sort of thing in the past. For example, when it agreed in the 1950s that Austria would be neutral and would remain outside the alliance system, both NATO and the Warsaw Pact, which existed at that time. Today, the United States finds it very difficult to act with that degree of diplomatic flexibility that it showed way back in the Eisenhower years of the 1950s. Indeed, on Ukraine itself and on the situation there, an issue which I suspect, in fact, I am sure is for the Russians, the area of key importance. I get no real sign that the US is, for the moment, prepared to take any of the steps the Russians are looking for, which is basically US encouragement, I'll use that word carefully, of Ukraine to move forward with the Minsk agreement, which requires Ukraine to negotiate directly with the leaders of the two Donbass republics, the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, as Ukraine committed itself to doing back in February 2015 when the Minsk agreement was agreed. So far, the US talks about the importance of complying with the Minsk agreement. Admittedly, that is relatively new, but it shows no real willingness to go beyond that and to take that necessary step of applying that kind of pressure on Ukraine. Perhaps as a sign of Russia's growing exasperation, we now starting to see certain steps the Russians are taking, which I think are intended to send very strong signals to the United States. The first is that the Russians have now formally declared the United States to be an unfriendly country. Now, that has involved a number of steps, one of which I've discussed many times on videos: severe restrictions on the operation of the US Embassy in Moscow. US diplomats cannot any longer travel far outside Moscow. They're restricted in number, and they're not allowed to employ Russian employees at the embassy to carry out menial tasks, something which has reduced the operations of the embassy to an almost a vestigial level. And at the same time, the Russians have also indicated that as a product of this declaration of the United States as an unfriendly country, that they're prepared to move against US agencies connected to the US government, which operate in Russia and which the Russians see as unfriendly to themselves. So that Radio Liberty, for example, has had its Russian bank accounts frozen. There's been moves to act against a Russian website, opposition website, which the Russians say is a foreign agent because it receives US funding. And no doubt there will be all sorts of other steps of a similar nature which are also being taken. Last but not least, there is a Russian move to denounce, or rather to confirm, Russia's withdrawal from the Open Skies Treaty. This is a treaty first proposed way back in the 1950s by President Eisenhower for aircraft by the two superpowers to fly over each other's territory, to carry out observations there as part of the so-called confidence building measures, which gained a great deal of traction during the Cold War. In the 1950s and 1960s, the Russians categorically rejected that. Eventually, after the end of the Cold War, they came round to it. An Open Skies Treaty was agreed by Russia and the United States. The European countries all joined in. The United States, under the Trump administration, then decided to pull out. The Russians, for a while, indicated that they would stay in, but now they've signaled that they're going to pull out too. So that essentially means the end of the Open Skies Treaty, which has only existed, as it turns out, for a very short time, which the United States first proposed and then eventually pulled out of, and which is clearly now becoming a victim of the freeze up of relations between Russia and the United States and between Russia and the West. All of these steps the Russians probably would have taken at some point anyway, but the timing of these steps, even as all these discussions for a summit are underway, clearly show the strength of Russian skepticism and doubt about the value of the summit and their, frankly, uncertainty about whether there's any point of having this summit happen at all. Well, at the moment, the US still seems to be very committed to having this summit. Clearly, the Biden administration, or at least the part of it which is currently in the ascendant, does want to patch up things with Russia in some way so that he can focus on countering China in the Pacific. But to be straightforward about this, if that's what they want to do, then they have to realize the time is running out. We're now in the middle of May. June is only a few weeks away. If there is going to be such a summit, when in June, when President Biden is due to visit Europe to attend the G7 meeting and to attend various NATO conferences, then the United States is going to have to start thinking about what moves it's going to make very quickly. We will see whether Secretary Blinken comes to Reykjavik with some definite proposals. If he comes with nothing, then I strongly suspect that a meeting between the Russians and the Americans, between Biden and Putin, will be in grave doubt and may not happen at all. Thank you for joining me for this program. I look forward to you joining me in future programs, both on this channel and our main channel, the Duran, where I do programs with my colleague and friend, Alex Christoforou. Please also check us out on our other platforms, SuperTube, Locals, and Odyssey. You'll find links under this video. Please also support us to the extent that you feel able via PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. Remember, we accept payments and donations in all currencies, including the new electronic ones. And I appreciate these are hard times for people, but any donations, however small, are entirely welcome, given the pressures that we work under. Please also remember to check out our Discord server and, of course, go to our shop, see the wonderful things we have there, our great magic mugs, our t-shirts, our hats, our hoodies, our sweatshirts, and all the rest. And also, please remember to press the like button on this video, if you like it, of course, and please also check us out, check your subscription. There have been many people who've commented and informed us about the problems they're having with their subscriptions to our YouTube channels. Thank you again for joining me for this program. I look forward to you joining me again, and have a wonderful day. Until then.